Welcome to Daily Tanya. Today is Wednesday, the 14th day of Shvat. Let's begin with Tzedakah, Gedela Tzedakah, Shemekarebes Esakeula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. Let's keep doing those mitzvahs, and let's hope Mashiach comes very soon. So, we begin today chapter 21 in the Tanya. The Rebbe continues with explaining the concept of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, the unity of God. And in the last chapter, the Alter Rebbe used the analogy of speech to describe how the world is totally as if it's nothing compared to Hashem, just like a word that we utter has no value at all compared to the power of speech, because we can speak infinitely, and certainly compared to the power of thoughts, where there we still have a concept of words, but it's in a different form of words. It's more subtle letters, not real letters as speech. And certainly when we compare the single word uttered, compared to the very essence of the soul, the emotive attributes, the intellectual attributes, certainly a word that is uttered has no value at all compared to the essence of the soul. And the same thing says, this is the analogy that is given to the world that Hashem uttered. Hashem created the world with words. With Dvar Hashem Shamayim Nasu, Hashem created the world with the words, the 10 utterances. So the words that is uttered, the world that is created, has no value from God's perspective at all. But now the Alter Rebbe continues talking about this analogy, that really the analogy is not exactly the same. There is speech, a human speech is not the same as God's speech. Obviously, not just the concept of speech that is not the same, but there is also what is the characteristics of speech. So in human speech, when you speak a word, the word becomes separated from the person who speaks. And now the words, once you say a word today, you cannot take it back. It receives its own identity, becomes an independent being. So the words that we utter, we communicate. But once it's communicated, the word becomes separated from the person. Unlike the feelings, the thoughts, that is all part of you. But in God, anything can be separated from God. God is everywhere. God's presence is everywhere. So obviously this cannot be attributed to God. The concept of separation, we cannot attribute to God. So why do we use the analogy of speech? Now the Rebbe says because the speech has also another characteristic, and that is the concept of revelation. Just like in human speech, it is revealing what a person had hidden for himself is now revealing to others. So this concept we attribute to God also, the concept of revelation, that God reveals his light to the creation, which from our perspective we are separated, and we receive the revelation from God. So this concept does exist when we're talking about God, and that is why we call the world as created by speech. So let's see inside what the Alter Rebbe says, chapter 21. Says the Alter Rebbe, "V'hinei kemidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheloi kemidas basar v'dam." Now the nature of the divine order is not like that of a human being, a creature of flesh and blood. Therefore, human terms cannot adequately describe divine qualities. So in our case, שאדם כשמדבר דיבור, הרי הבל הדיבור שבפיו, הוא מורגש ונראה דבר בפני עצמו, מובדל משורשו שאין עשה בחינת הנפש עצמו. When a man says something, the breath of the spoken word may be sensed and is perceived as an independent entity separated from its source. What is the source of the speech, of the words? Namely, the 10 intellectual and emotional faculties of the soul itself, like we explained yesterday. Where does the word come from? It comes from the intellect. When you think of a concept, then you feel it. Then you start thinking how to develop the feeling and how to achieve it. And then you start thinking about it. And from thought, it leads to speech. So everything it's rooted in the soul itself, in the emotive and intellectual attributes. So while still encapsulated in its source, the word is utterly nullified. However, when it is spoken and it leaves its source, it takes on an identity of its own. So this is true, however, only with regard to human speech, not to God's speech. God, there's no such thing being separated from God. אבל הקדוש ברוך הוא אין דיבורוי מובדל ממנו יסברך, חס ושלום, כי אין דבר חוץ ממנו, ולייס אסר פנוי מיני. But the speech of God is not, heaven forbid, separated from his divine self. For nothing is outside of him, and no place is devoid of him. So that his speech is always contained within him. ולכן, therefore, אין דיבורי יסברך כדיבורנו חס ושלום, כמו שאין מחשבתא כמחשבתנו, כדכתיב כלא מחשבוי סיים מחשבי שיכם, וכתיב כן גובו דרוכם דרכיכם וגוימר. Therefore, his speech is not like our speech, God forbid, just as obviously his thought is not like our thought, as it is written, for my thoughts are not like your thoughts. And it is also written, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Similarly, God's speech is different from human speech. So why do we refer to as the creation as God's speech? And that's what we explained before, what the Alter Rebbe is going to say. And there is the other element of speech, the fact that it is revealing what was concealed. And that aspect we can attribute somehow through the speech of Hashem. Says the Alter Rebbe, "V'lo nikra dibur yisborach b'shem dibur, rak al derech moshel, kemoi shedibur atachton shebaodam umegale lashoim mimasha yatzafon v'nelam b'machshavtoi." God's speech is called speech only in order to illustrate that quality of revelation which it possesses. For just as man's speech reveals to his audience what was hidden and concealed in his thoughts, כך למיילו, באין סוף ברוך הוא, יציאת האור והחיות ממנו יסברך, מהעלם אל הגילוי, לברוא עולם וסלח יסם, נקרא בשם דיבור. So too, the emergence of the light and life force of the Ein Sof from concealment before creation into revelation through the acts of creation for the purpose of creating and animating the worlds, this is called speech. Because this is the element of revelation. That's why we call it speech. So in this case, the audience is the created being, which from its own perspective at least, is separated from God. And it does not have the revelation. And once it's being revealed, the world, to it, that is the concept of speech, meaning being revealed. It is these revelations of divine light and life force that comprise the 10 divine utterances, that are recorded in the Torah, namely, when it says in Bereshis, in Genesis, it says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, and God said, let there be light. Let the earth sprout forth, and so on, by which the world was created. So this is the speech of Hashem, which means Hashem's revelation to the world, the entire creation. There is another concept of speech of Hashem. This is the prophecies, the words of the Torah that the prophets had. This is also a concept of revelation, which is also referred to as speech. Likewise, all the other words of the Torah, the prophets and the holy writings, are also called speech, even though they were not revealed for the purpose of creation, since they too represent the divine revelation, which the prophets perceived in their prophetic vision. Hence, so that when we refer to God's revelation as his speech, the analogy extends only to speech as revelation and communication, but not to speech as something separated from the speaker, an idea which is not applicable to godliness. So this is the end of today's shir, giving us further understanding in the oneness of Hashem, and how the world is created, and how everything is nullified in front of Hashem, and therefore there's no way to connect to Hashem unless Hashem gives us a way, gives us a bridge to connect, which is the Torah and the mitzvahs. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. All the best.